It's Emil Guillermo. Emil, Amok to you. How are you? I just spent a couple hours listening to a tribute to a man who probably could be described as the father of Asian America. I mean, he really could be. And of course, I'm talking about one Norm Mineta, Norman Y. Mineta. And I mentioned this. I mean, he died more than a month ago, and the tributes are starting now. They had a tribute in Washington D.C. last week. They brought his ashes back to San Jose, back to California yesterday. They had that motorcade. Today they had the big tribute in the San Jose Civic Auditorium. I was able to watch it via live stream. It's the beauty of technology. I'm about, I don't know, about 2 hours away from San Jose, but I wanted to be there, but I also wanted to be here with you. And now I could do both. I could be there in spirit and see Norm. I think they had his ashes. They had his ashes are going to be laying next to his mother and father and his family today, probably right now. The tribute just finished about less than an hour ago, and here I am talking about it because it's real, it's important, and it's special because President Clinton was there. Now, I was always going to go via some kind of stream to witness this, and I thought Clinton would go first, and I missed it, but they had some technical difficulties, and the president went after. They started with the San Jose Mayor Sam Liccardo, and then it was Mayor Willie Brown of San Francisco, and it was revealed how close their friendship was. I didn't know that when I worked with Norm. I was his press secretary for the 103rd Congress, and that never came up. His closeness to Willie Brown, but certainly his relationship with Norman Panetta, or not Norm, Leon Panetta. I see. Most of the time people call Leon Panetta Leon Mineta. I just called Leon Panetta Norman Panetta. I'm dyslexic about how they screw up their names. But that was a source of humor throughout the whole tribute. Panetta was great, and also what a great public servant Leon Panetta has been. In terms of mainstream politics, you may not agree with all of his positions, but he has served in all these many capacities. He was there to pay tribute to Norm. Norm's sons, and they said there's no such thing as stepson. So there was Mark and Bob Brantner and Stuart and Dave Mineta. They were one family, and they spoke on behalf of the family. Denny, Norm's wife, I didn't see her on the video, but what a tribute. What a tribute. And then President Clinton gave his speech that I'm going to play the bit of that I think says how important Norm Mineta is to Asian America, to this country, to American politics. I mean, what he did when he became mayor of San Jose, which is why today is Norm Mineta Day in San Jose. But, he was the first Asian American mayor of a major city, 1971, then ran for Congress. I remember the talk back when I was with his office was amongst staffers was, boy, Norm made a decision not to go leadership, not to go into, this for the speakership, right? The Pelosi route. His route to power, his route to congressional glory would be as a chair of a committee, a major committee. And he was Public Works and Transportation. That was the committee to be a part of. So, we had people talking about, his time there. But I mean, that's the significance of Norm politically if he had stopped there, but he didn't stop there. And you'll recall that he left Congress soon after the 103rd because of the polarizing sense that, really started to take hold when Newt Gingrich and the Republicans took over the House, right? They called it the contract. They had the contract for America. Some people called it the contract on America. That was kind of like the joke, but it was not a joke because it was the beginning of the end. This was like 1989 and the beginning of the polarizing of politics that I always point to the rise of talk radio, the rise of conservative talk radio. Rush Limbaugh in his ascent, 1989. And so the importance of Norm is when he left, he came back and worked the executive branch. And he came back and worked under Clinton and became the first Asian American to serve in the Clinton cabinet as Commerce Secretary. And Clinton talked about that today. He said, it's great that, he was able to do that for Asian Americans and for Norm. I remember being in Norm's office as his press secretary. And I one of the perks is that, you got to go to a rose garden ceremony every now and then. And one of the great things was just going up to meet President Clinton, shake his hand. Here's the thing about Clinton. His hands were so soft. You'd think that a politician like Clinton would be glad-handing and his hands would feel like I don't know, like a callous shoe or, like an old foot or something. But it was like it was baby soft. I couldn't believe it. That's a lot of hand lotion, I figure. But I told Clinton when I met him, I said, I work for Congressman Mineta. And without missing a beat, he said, "That's a good man." I mean, I'm in the line, so I'm going through quickly, but that's what he had to say about Mineta. Back when I saw him in the Rose Garden, he had different things to say about Mineta today, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But I want to talk about all the rest of the things that are going on in the show today as we kick off. This is show 325. Imagine that, 325 of these every day. We're here Monday through Friday. We just do this. We talk extemporaneously. Yeah, we just talk about stuff that's happening of import to Asian Americans and everyone else. So you don't have to be AAPI or AAXs, as I call us. Asian American X, fill in your ethnicity. So you could be AANMs, Asian American Northern Marianas. I mean, they came up in Clinton's speech today. I think he meant Northern Hawaiian Islands, but anyway, he corrected himself. Something with the Northern Mariana Islands came up yesterday in conversation with a friend of mine. They had a Flag Day ceremony. A Northern Mariana flag was set up at the Smithsonian. So I got they're in my hearts and my head. So if you're an AANM, you get a shout out today on our show. Or you're an AAH, an Asian American Hmong. So that's the naming convention I like. But look, you don't have to be any of that. AAPI, AAX. You can be an ALL. All's the rest of you. Because all of this pertains to everyone. It honestly does. We're all in one boat, as the metaphor goes. It's not cliche. It's just a standard thing to indicate we are all in this together. And that was kind of the theme about the ceremony today with Norm. Oh, let me tell you what else I'm going to talk about today. I'm also going to talk about Vincent Chin. And this is important. There's a confluence of things happening. We got Vincent Chin's death, actually the beating that he incurred June 19th, 1978. Or not 19, excuse me, not 1978, but June 19th, 1981. It is. Oh, excuse me, 82. Oh, God, Emil, come on. Got to be quicker on the math. Because it's 40 years, right? So we have June 19th, we have Juneteenth, and we have Father's Day, all kind of colliding. It's a nice confluence of things. It's happening on Sunday. So I wrote my column on the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund website, ALDEF, AALDEF.org. Go to AALDEF.org/blog and read that. That's out there today. Catch that. I'm going to reference that a little later on in the show. So you have this confluence of events, Juneteenth, Father's Day, and you have Vincent Chin's beating. And then on today, on the 16th, you have Norm Mineta coming home, being laid to rest in the Valley of his Dreams, his son David said. They're in San Jose, California. And like I said, I worked with him briefly in the 103rd Congress, but I swear, Norm Mineta, there are so many times I wanted to call him Dad. There are so many times I looked at him and I saw him as an Asian American father figure. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. I'm not the only young Asian American guy who came up, when he was in Congress and when he was in his political ranks, because I saw them. I saw Asian American men and women, members who came up through JCL internships, people who came up as interns in Congress. They all looked up to Norm. Norm was the example and he was the model. And I don't think it's far-fetched to say, yeah, he was a father figure to many Asian Americans in politics, in business, people who saw the connection between politics and business. Norm was it. He was the guy. And I remember even in circles like journalism, which aren't exactly, corporate journalism is a business. But when I first met him and saw him, when he came to Asian American Journalism Association events and to talk about internment, to talk about redress and other issues, my God, I mean, everyone knew what he represented. He was an Asian American first. He was an exemplar, a leader, a father figure. And when you got to work with him as I was able to as a press secretary, boy, there's a lot of times you spend in, you're in the passenger side, he's in the driver's side. I don't think I ever drove his car, but he was always driving. I was always carrying stuff. You develop a closeness, and so I think it's no coincidence to feel these kind of fatherly, paternal kind of feelings toward Norm as we approach Father's Day, as we approach this just extraordinary confluence of things. Vincent Chin, Father's Day, Juneteenth, Norm Mineta, all these feelings coming together. I'm just telling you, it's a very complex morning. You know, uh, even experiencing the ceremony, the tribute to Norm, which was held at the San Jose Civic Auditorium, experiencing it as you're experiencing this. Maybe you're listening to this on. Maybe you're experiencing this on the web, right? The Emil Guillermo Orchestra says, Emil, we got to take five. Okay, then go. No, no, I mean that though. I mean there's just something about when you are in this sort of space. A lot of people want to poo-poo and say, "Oh, it's not as good as real life." Yeah, of course, it's not as good as real life. But you know what? There's something of value when you're distance, when we're in a pandemic, when we're for some reason apart. There's something valuable about being able to communicate in this way that is definitely real, is definitely not fake, is definitely you've been through an experience. I mean, that's what I felt when I listened to all the speakers, when I listened to Willie Brown. Boy, still funny. Didn't have any notes, spoke off the cuff. Even Bill Clinton commented, "Oh, Willie Brown still has it." Bill Clinton said after he said, I want to come back and I want to be when I grow up. I want to be like Willie Brown." And Willie Brown was kind of self-effacing, and he talked about Norm being a good man, and how knowing that Norm's in a good place, how Willie Brown could use a good word with the man upstairs, if you know what I mean. So it was a nice exit line for Willie Brown, who is, shall we say, has an interesting, colorful kind of for a politician. This is the thing about politicians. You think that some things are enough to sink a politician, some stories, some well, if they're stories, they're just stories. But for lesser politicians, they don't survive even the hint of scandal. But Willie Brown has, and if you don't know who Willie Brown is, the former mayor of San Francisco, former California Speaker of the Assembly. He was famous in 1972 for making a speech at the uh, Democratic convention that George McGovern spoke at. He said, "Give me back my delegation," and that's the one line that Willie Brown is known for nationwide among political historians and people old enough to remember the 72 convention. And I never knew this, but Willie Brown saying Norm was instrumental in helping get give Willie Brown his delegation. So, I mean, Norm played a part in that story. And Norm had a friendship, and that was important. So, all that, you know, it was like 2 hours worth of tributes. And then you get to the President of the United States. Then you get to Bill Clinton. So, you can't fall asleep. You can't say, I got to go to lunch. It's like past 1 o'clock. I got to eat now. No, here comes the President of the United States. Here comes Bill Clinton. And so let's hear from Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton, the key part of Bill Clinton's speech on Norm Mineta is how he talked about how Mineta, after spending 6 months as the Commerce Secretary under Clinton, sort of in a pinch, gives Clinton a call.
So he calls me on the phone and he said, and I'm out. We're on the way out. He said, President-elect Bush has asked me to be Secretary of Transportation. And, I thought this was just going to be a temporary deal coming to Washington, and I'd kind of like to go back and make a little money.
See, now that's kind of funny, right? This is almost kind of like a revealing story. Norm, look, Norm's always been a modest guy. Norm, when I first met him, he was driving an old beat up white Dodge Colt, and there was nothing extravagant. He was man of the people. But when he left Congress and started working in outside of government, or when he went to the executive branch, he was he was starting to make more money in the corporate world, as he was doing things for Lockheed Martin and that sort of thing. But now back in government, he was a public servant. That was his role. And so Clinton telling this story is pretty revealing about Norm. Like, hey, I think isn't it time to make some money? And he did make some money. By the end, Norm was well rewarded for all his efforts that he did in Washington. And so here's Clinton again.
And he said, and besides, it's an honor to have a Republican ask me to be the only Democrat in his cabinet, but you know how America's getting so polarized, he said. And you think the Democrats will think I'm disloyal to my lifelong allegiance? And what do you think I ought to do?
Now, this is funny because this is Norm talking to Clinton about, hey, here's Bush wants me to be his transportation secretary, and he's Republican. You're a Democrat. Am I going to appear disloyal? What's funny to me is that Clinton was never he was a Democrat, but for some people who were a little further to the left, they saw Clinton as right there in the middle and maybe more tilting right than left. I mean, there was a reason why Clinton was called a blue dog, right? A blue dog Democrat, because they were those people who were they were going to be sort of the halfway point between those who were totally polarized on the left and those totally polarized on the right. The people were trying to, and look, in retrospect, you see them as, hey, these are the people who can get things done. These are the people who work together. So in many ways, this is a real inside conversation that Clinton is revealing to people at this tribute to Norm, because Norm is saying, look, hey, now the Republicans want me to be a Secretary of Transportation, and we're in a totally polarized world. What do I do? Right? I mean, that's what he's asking.
And I thanked him for first asking me what I thought, because, when you leave office, the good news is you can say whatever you want. The bad news is nobody cares anymore. So,
see, now that's a good line. That's a good line. You can say whatever you want. The bad news is that no one cares anymore. That's what happens when you leave office. That's what actually happens when, you leave some kind of high post. You get a talk show somewhere. And when you can't get a talk show somewhere, you do a web show. Yes. All right. So here's Clinton again, trying to help Norm with this dilemma.
So he cared enough to ask. And I told him, I said, Norm, I think you really need to do this. And I think you need to do it because it's unusual and because nobody expects it anymore, and because America's gotten so polarized, and because you're the best qualified person to do this job. But I said, you could see it back in the 90s where we were going and where we're wound up today, where sort of our identities are defined by what we're not and who we're not. Norman has spent a lifetime trying to be a builder, not a breaker, a uniter, not a divider.
A builder, not a breaker, a uniter, not a divider. That came out not just in Clinton's story, but in everything that everyone said today about Norm Mineta. Really. And he was someone even compared him to the way Stephen Curry plays basketball with the Golden State Warriors. Not afraid to let his ego take backseat to someone else if it meant that we all win together. And in fact, when he mentioned it was the Coast Guard admiral, former admiral, or I guess you're retired admiral, uh, when she mentioned Stephen Curry, big cheer, right? Because we're in Northern California and everyone loves the Warriors. But you could see with Clinton here coming up with the same themes, the same threads that come up that say, hey, this is the kind of guy that Norm Mineta is, a builder, not a breaker, a uniter, not a divider.
Empower others, not to get someone who used his power to empower others, not to get more power for himself at other people's expense. All that's out of fashion today. Looks like everything we live for, all this crowd that got up and talked tonight, is just going to be put in the trash can of history because the information system is so divided and broken up and so polarized, and so it's like we're all encased in it, and our attention span's about 10 seconds, which ought to bother you. Butterflies have an attention span of 9 seconds. And here we just told this story of Norm Mineta. 90 years. And I used to think about, what made this guy work, because I was so fascinated by the camps because of my own experience. I think something happened to him besides meeting Al Simpson, which is a pretty good deal. When I talk to Simpson live, I'm going to tell him that I now know I always liked him because he was a friend of Mineta.
So this is Clinton. He's interesting to note that Norm. He points out this is all out of fashion. This idea of empowering others. Maybe it's good in basketball, but it's still out of fashion, right? In politics, where everyone grabs power for themselves, and everyone, like, if you're a Republican, how do the Republicans are acting now? Grab a bit of power to, if you perceive Trump to have the power, you stand by him and stand behind him, and that's where you derived your power, even though he's dead wrong. You look at the Republicans who have the courage to stand up to, the malarkey of Trump and the MAGA folks, and that's a key and central thing about our polarization, because people, even when they're wrong, they insist they are right, and hence more division, more polarization. And as Clinton said, the whole thing about Norm's approach to politics and working together and crossing the line, reaching across the aisle, working together, all that's out of fashion today. And he says that everything we are living for, that we're talking about at Norm's memorial, it's like going to be put in the trash can of history because the information system is so divided, broken up, and polarized. I guess what he's saying really is that who's going to hear all these things about Mineta? I'm presenting it to my audience because you're a mixed audience, but also primarily an Asian American one. And that was part of Norm's greatness. He had this appeal, a universal appeal. And it also was based on, you heard Clinton say, about his camp experience. What he meant by that is that two of the camps, Japanese internment camps, were in Arkansas when he was governor. And that made him curious about what had gone on. And they also mentioned Alan Simpson because Alan Simpson met Norm Mineta when Norm was in camp in Wyoming. Both of them were Boy Scouts. Simpson was the elder Boy Scout. And later on, they met again in Congress. But they met when the Boy Scouts went to the internment camp and met the scouts who were inside the internment camp interned. That's a fascinating story. And that shows how you can have these, they call them strange bedfellows, right? Simpson and Mineta, one Democrat, one Republican, Alan Simpson, but you can find common ground. And really, that's what politics should be about. I mean, you could be on different sides until it's time to work together and come to solutions. I mean, that's the thing about Norm. He was about solutions. He was practical. He was, hey, his public works and transportation. He hardware, stuff that, things that are broke, fix it. That's what a public works and transportation guy does. And then when he was, Secretary of Transportation, something broke, let's fix it. Something broke in our transportation system. And even Clinton admitted that when Mineta spent 6 months as Commerce Secretary, he did so much in the 6 months. It was incredible. So here's more of Clinton.
But think about this. I think when he was a little boy in that camp, maybe because of his parents, maybe because of just who he was, maybe whatever, I think he decided that he would find a way to make sure it never happened again. I also think he decided, with the help of his family and support system, that he would not live as a victim, that he would not let it define his whole life.
Oh, man. Now, this is where Clinton starts hitting the nail on the head, right? He said the two things that he thinks that happened to Norm is that he wanted to make sure that whatever happened in the camps, to force those camps to exist, never happened again. And that he decided that he would not live as a victim. And it's true. You don't have to be a victim. I know a lot of people say, oh, you're acting like a victim. No, I'm acting like a man struggling. There's a difference. The man struggling is a hero. The man who's a victim is victimized. But the man who's struggling and still fighting, well, he's still fighting. There's a difference. And you heard Clinton say, Norm somehow must have decided in the camps that he would not live as a victim, that he would not let it define his whole life, that he will continue to struggle and fight and still reach for something else beyond the camps that would define him. And he did. You're 10 years old, a Boy Scout, born in America, yet treated like the enemy just because you look Japanese. Well, you are you're Japanese American, but they couldn't see it. You're 10 years old. Do you stay locked in that box, or do you reach out and make it to the City Hall of San Jose, make it to the Capitol Hill and the Congress, make it to the executive branch of two presidencies? Examples of which he was the first Asian American.
Terrible thing. Yeah, they were terrible to a lot of people. People that weren't as smart as my father had their land stolen. A lot of people were sent to those camps just so people could steal their land. So he could have stayed mad his entire life. full of grievance, full of anger, the kind of stuff we see on TV all the time now, you know. He could be looking for rallies to attend just so he could fulminate. And he had good reasons that he could have been really mad for a whole lifetime. And what did he teach us? You have a choice. And he made a choice. And the choice that he made to be the author of his own life, to be a builder, not a breaker, to be a uniter, not a divider, to empower others, not to use others to get more power for himself. Those things changed everything. What was coming out of his life is what you heard in the testimony of his children, of the admiral, of all of this rest of us crew who liked, admired, and loved him. That's what you need to learn from this. He made the right choice. May not be popular today. May be painful to see people who choose to divide and not unite, to break and not build, to disempower instead of empower. It may be painful to you to see that's all in vogue, but it doesn't make it right.
See, that's right. I mean, that's the thing about Norm. That's the thing about what Clinton saw in Norm, you know, that he took the power to be a uniter, not a divider, and that he really used his life to author something new and different, but something together, right, with others. Not to have these grievances, not to use Clinton's word, to fulminate. It was a great speech by Clinton. And then he brings it back and talks about the people who spoke ahead of him. And then he ends it with telling him what to do, joining George Bush's cabinet or not.
When I almost pleaded with Norm to take that job because I knew how important it was at a time we were tearing each other's guts out, that there'd be somebody that just stood there and showed up, a human in full, a life in full, somebody who was relating to other people in full. That's what we have to make of this life. Every single person in the world wakes up every day with a little scale inside, with all your hopes and fears and dreams on one side or the other. There's the nightmares and the anger and the resentment over here and the hopes and dreams over here. And the great thing about being a human being is you get to reset the scales every day. You get to make a choice with astonishing consistency, decade after decade after decade. A person who might have made very different choices made the choices that brought all of us into this room today and brought all that feeling out you heard. That's the meaning of his life and the enduring impact of it. I don't care what happens. Don't give it up. Norm Mineta was right, and we need to follow him right to the very end.
And that's Bill Clinton. You know, he's right. We have a choice. We can make a choice every day. And every day there are certain people who say, continue to divide, continue to lie, continue to believe in the big lie. And then there are others who say, let's work together. Let's work together and be one country and act as if we're on the same team. We've got to make this choice. He said, once again, we just need to be these people who are human. You show up as human and for life and for somebody, and we're all relating to everyone else, to each other. We got this little scale inside with all of your hopes and fears and dreams, and on one side or the other, there's the nightmares and the anger and the resentment over here, and the hopes and dreams over there. And the great thing about being a human being is you get to reset the scales every day. You get to make a choice with astonishing consistency, decade after decade. And isn't this the truth about Norm? He makes the right choice, and it's a reason why we have all been attracted to him at some point or another in our lives, some for many, many years. I mean, I know I'm a short timer. I was just with the Mineta team as his press secretary for the 103rd, and just for a short part of the 103rd. But my God, it was people who work in Congress. They know this, and it's not just unique to Mineta, but people who work in congressional offices. It's like a little family. You're working, you're advocating for the beliefs and the goals of your boss, your guy who represents, right, an entire constituencies, not just of a district like Norm of the San Jose area, around Santa Clara, Los Altos, that South Bay area, but then other Californians, and then to a greater degree other, not just Japanese Americans who were interned, but all Japanese Americans, and then all Asian Americans. That's why I don't think it's far fetched to say, when you look to Father's Day this year, June 19th, this is sort of like the prelude to Father's Day. Norm Mineta was the father of Asian American politics, and the father to that broad base of Asian America. 90 years old. He passed on the first week of May, Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Heritage Month. We'll never forget it. And we talk about it today on June 16th, and extended, like I said, this preamble to Father's Day, because his ashes have come home from D.C. to California, where he'll be put to rest. And it was a sitting send off, a fitting tribute to Norm this morning, Thursday morning, today. It was Norm Mineta Day in San Jose. And I was surprised. Bill Clinton, I didn't think Bill Clinton was going to be there. I thought, oh, well, certainly Bill Clinton will be on a big screen. No, Bill Clinton was there. Bill Clinton was there. Sam Liccardo, the mayor, Mike Honda, former congressman, Willie Brown, former mayor of San Francisco. We had Leon Panetta, the former congressman. We had his Norm's sons. It was a great tribute. I would have wanted to be there, but I noticed a number of people were masked. Some of the speakers were masked. They took it off to speak. It was an honor system. COVID's on the rise again. And in many ways, I wish I could have been there, but in a lot of ways too, I got a lot. just watching, hearing, I felt like I was there. I felt certainly emotionally I was there, and I hope you appreciate the tiny excerpt from Bill Clinton, because I think it really touched on what made Norm special. Norm wasn't a victim. He was the author of his life story, and it still may have been a struggle, but in the end, you balance it out, and the triumphs say this man was not a victim. He didn't leave a victim. He left a victor. So, and I'm just glad that I can say I had a special working relationship for a short time, because he did mean something to me. And I write on the Aldef blog in a column. I write about one day how I gave a speech at an alumni club function, a university alumni club function in San Francisco that he attended, and I got to be his opening. And he really touched me. I mean, he came up to me after, embraced me. He wasn't feeling well. He was recovering from an operation, and he expressed his feelings for me that I just that totally surprised me. He was generous with his affection and his support, his love, and I know at the time I probably needed it. I probably needed that kind of boost coming from someone like him. And don't you know that was probably that was probably more than 20 years ago. And many people thought, "Oh, Norm he's an Iron Man, right?" That's the thing about Norm. You thought that maybe this would do it. I mean, there were so many health things that he had that you thought, "Oh, well, this is going to break him now." I mean, and you crossed your fingers, and then he survived, and then he overcame. That's why you just never thought that Norm would be gone. In fact, that was the sentiment from a lot of people, like Leon Panetta. I can't believe he's gone. I know that he's going to live on in others, because he will the inspiration that he gave others will live on, and people will see that same Mineta-ishness live on in others. Anyway, Norm Mineta. I wasn't going to talk about this so much, but clearly it did affect me. It did impact me, and I yeah. I mean, I made some decisions. Like Clinton says, you make a decision every day in life. You know what you're going to do. What is important to you. And I made the decision at one point to leave working in politics in that capacity, which also meant leaving the Mineta office. And in some ways, I regret that, because it was a good position and it could have led to other things in that realm if I wanted. But like I'm a media guy, and that's why no, I don't regret. My only regret is that it meant that I could not work in the same way with Norm, and all those feelings came up today watching the special memorial. Norm Mineta, R.I.P. We'll never forget you. So, speaking of forgetting, that is a term that I used in a new column that I wrote. It's kind of a pastiche of memories of the past 4 decades, and I call it 4 decades since 5 Days of Pain, a way to remember Vincent Chin and forget, not forgive, his killer. And you know, I wanted to talk about it today. It's on the ALDEF blog, aaldef.org/blog. I'll talk a little about it today. I want you to read it. I'll talk more about it tomorrow. Excuse me, and maybe talk more about it on the day on June 19th. But you can catch it, and maybe I'll do a special thing on Father's Day. Like I said, this is a special confluence of things happening. On the lead up to Father's Day, we have the death, or not the death, but the burial rite. The ashes are laying next to. They're going to be placed next to his family, Norman Netta's family in San Jose. And like I said, I think Norman Netta, it is not too far fetched to call him the father of Asian America. That's my term for him. That's how I see him. And then, so it's Father's Day. Then you got Juneteenth, which is this delay, right? I mean, Juneteenth now a federal holiday. And it's a federal holiday because it kind of talks about our relationship to the truth. We don't want to admit the truth. And when we do, we want it to be very slow. We slow roll it. We slow play it. Talk about slow rolling the slaves. Emancipation Proclamation was in 1862. But the slaves in Texas didn't hear about it until 1865. That's a slow roll. How do you explain that? Bad Wi-Fi? This is crazy, right? I mean, this is why Juneteenth, you celebrate it because, all right, so the slaves in Texas finally got the word that they were free. It only took 3 years, or 2+ years, really, to be precise. We don't want to make the perps feel any worse than they have to. It wasn't quite a full 3 years, but it was a 2+. Still, the fact that people in Texas had the slaves working overtime is abysmal. I mean, it's just horrendous to think that that's how we deal with the truth. That's how we deal with the moral truth. We slow play it all the way until we're forced to do otherwise. I mean, really, when you think of it, is it any different from the way the former president, number 45, does anything? Do you think it would have been different under his watch? Do you think he'd want to slow roll all this? So we have Juneteenth, we got Father's Day, we got this Vincent Chin case, and we know all about delay. Because truth be told, we haven't gotten justice on Vincent Chin. Asian Americans have not had justice on Vincent Chin. The official record will say that Chin died on June 23rd. That's when they actually pulled the plug on him. But the night his ordeal began was June 19th, when Ronald Evans, a white auto worker, took a baseball bat and clubbed Chin unconscious in a fast food parking lot in suburban Detroit. So that's why for the last 8 years, I've been advocating that, Asian Americans should be looking at the 19th, the 20th of June, the 21st, the 22nd, and then the 23rd. the day when Chin didn't wake up. We should be looking and thinking. We should be looking at these days and thinking about what's going on. Is Chin going to live? Is Chin going to survive? And we should use it to think about us. Are we what are we as Asian Americans? Where are we currently? Are we going to survive? Are we going to make it through? You know, and you think about how we have just during the pandemic about 11,000 transgressions against Asian Americans all across the spectrum, from minor epithets to murder. And we're talking about situation in Atlanta, right? When 6 Asian American women, Korean American women gunned down. So 11,000 though, total of all transgressions. Not all hate crimes perhaps, but definitely transgressions. And it includes up to including murder, right? 11,000 cases, and all of them you may as well dub Vincent Chins. They're all Vincent Chins. So here we are, 2022, approaching the 40th anniversary of Chin's death. We don't need a federal holiday. We just maybe need some time to contemplate what these 4 decades have to say about the state of Asian America. And I offer my piece as a guide to help you think about this, and we'll talk more about this tomorrow on the show, and then again, maybe I'll do a special thing on Father's Day, a special live thing, and I'll talk about how I've dealt with it and how I've been involved in the story, just as a reporter. I mean, I'm not a I'm not like Helen Zia, who was intimately involved in the case as a trustee. I mean, I do talk to her, or I did, but I just want to clear the air about what talking to Vincent Chin's killer meant to me. I mean, when I finally talked to his killer, it was like 30 years after. 30 years. I mean, it was like case was done pretty much on the criminal side. On the civil side, I've tried to do as much reporting as possible to get people to see that, hey, Ronald Ebens owes money to Vincent Chin's trust. But some people think that by talking to the killer was in a way allowing him to apologize or allowing an opportunity for forgiveness. I as I point out in the title of the column, 4 decades since 5 days of pain, a way to remember Vincent Chin and forget, not forgive his killer. I think I'm not Ronald Ebens's confessor, but I did want to hear from him. And not to pass judgment, but here it is on the 40th anniversary, and I just don't care about Ronald Ebens. But I care a heck of a lot about Vincent Chin, the estate, and justice for Asian Americans. Because that is what 40 years has told me, that the system still works for someone like Ronald Ebens far more than it does for innocent victims like Vincent Chin. So read my column. I read my column and see what you think. I'll talk more about it tomorrow, and I'll talk more about what Eben said to me. And if you want to join in the conversation and say, Emil, I saw what you said about Chin, and I saw what Eben said, and I don't get it. Or what? Maybe you do. I don't know, but we can talk about that tomorrow. Say, because it's emotional, right? We're thinking about activism. We're thinking about like what Clinton was saying. Everyone makes this choice. What is the choice we're going to make? And how do we see ourselves not as victims? We're in struggle, but we're not victims. We can be the heroes, not the victims. Meaning we author our stories and can go beyond the circumstances we find ourselves. So we'll talk about that. Tomorrow. But a very emotional day as we contemplate. Like I said, this confluence of things coming up. And I was not expecting the tribute to Norman Y. Mineta to be so emotional, but it was. And now, darn it, I may get emotional again tonight when the Golden State Warriors try to put away the Boston Celtics. Now, I am hoping it happens. I have friends in Boston. They're rooting for the Celtics, although they've already said to me, Emil, we're ready for whatever happens to happen. They've already exceeded. That sounds like they're putting up the white flag, right? But I don't think so. So let's see what happens. I say the Dubs in 7. So if they lost tonight, I have a little escape route. Because the Dubs probably want to win in San Francisco. But, you can't rely on that. You got to say, if you got to win when you have the opportunity. So I'm hoping that this extra day of rest that they get gives them a little boost, and they got to be the team in the first quarter that they are in the fourth quarter. They got to strike hard, quickly, fast, quickly, and they got to end fast and quickly. And their normal way is to be lackadaisical for the first and second, strike in the third quarter, and then try to hold on. But I've seen them lose that way too. So I'm hoping for a big day from Stephen Curry, who made no shots, no three-point shots in Game 5. Have him come back in Game 6, make all his shots. I can see a good game from Jordan Poole. I want to see Draymond Green act like an adult. I want to see Gary Payton II do well. Of course, and Andrew Wiggins. If Andrew Wiggins scores 20 points, the Warriors win. I mean, he scored like 26 the other day and had all those rebounds. If Wiggins has a good game, the Warriors will win. But I hope that doesn't mean that people will give Wiggins the MVP tonight, because Stephen Curry deserves the MVP. If they win. Now, I'm not counting the Celtics out. They're young, but I think they showed what they were made of. And the Warriors have already beaten the Celtics at home in Boston. I was there. I mean, I wasn't in the stadium. I just think, yeah, let's see the Warriors come back. That'll be a nice antidote to some of the heaviness that we're feeling today. And like I said, at the Mineta tribute, the Admiral of the Coast Guard, because as Transportation Secretary, Mineta was in charge of the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard Admiral who was speaking talked about the Warriors and Stephen Curry, and talked about how Mineta was the distributor of the ball. He was able to share power. And I think everyone sort of lit up, and they showed their Warrior pride. So maybe that's a good sign. On the day that they put the ashes of Norm Mineta next to his family and his parents in San Jose. All right, so hey, thank you for listening today. We're here every day, Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific, live. Usually we don't go this long, but there was so much to go over. Let me say also that you can watch this on emilguillermo.media. emilguillermo.media. You can also watch it on Twitter at Emil Amok, and also on amok.com. I'll put up the replay. Yesterday, we did story time at 5:30 Pacific, and some people were there. You can still catch the replay of that. For the replay, though, because it was live, there was like 18 minutes of which is sort of like pregame chatter. We're in the green room and talking about stuff. So go forward about 18 minutes, and then you'll hear my story about my father. Maybe I'll chop it up if I can and post it somewhere so you can see. It's like a 5-minute story. Other tellers were there. My friend Randy Ross and Tamika Wong and Arlen Hughes, and Julian Simeon, and what's his name? Becker. Oh, I don't have his name. He was a last-minute ad. He told a great poem, but he was there with us. Abe Becker was there. And Francis Kai Hua Huang was there. So it was a good show. So watch it all on emilguillermo.media, and then on Facebook, and then fast forward, because I read another or tell another Vincent Chin story at the tail end at 1:18, 1 hour and 18 minutes in. I tell a Vincent Chin story that is different, slightly different from the piece that's on the Aldef blog now. All right, go Warriors. Let's see. Oh, regular listeners know that at this point we get meditative. You just start looking around and be present and be aware. We can let thoughts go by. And bad thoughts, say, stop the bad thoughts. You say, how do you do that, Emil? Say, can you really do? Yeah, I can just say, stop the bad. The thoughts are not real. They're just thoughts. Stop the bad thoughts. And I concentrate on my breath. Breathing in, I see space. Space. Things are larger. You're not in a closet. You're in a spacious room. Breathing out, I see freedom. Space. Breathing out, free. Breathing in, space. Breathing out, free. And it gives you that elbow room so you can be present and aware and not feel confined. And it gives you room. You have room to breathe. And then if you notice the things around you and you see that you have been, somehow debilitated by some thoughts or feelings of shame, feelings of not being whole, not being important. If you feel those instances of shame, that's almost like a tip-off that the answer is self-love. So put this hand here like this, put this hand here like this, give yourself a squeeze. It works. And so, as I wish for you, or as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo here. Hey, back again tomorrow. 2 p.m. Pacific Live. Right here. Till then. Mahal Kita.